Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muluwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very happy that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. We have two great guests today. Olugbemisola, Rhuday-Perkovich, and Donna Limerick are here to celebrate Mae Makes A Way. Before we invite Bimmy and Donna into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Adventures of Augie Otter, It's Okay to Be You, written by Paul DiPietro. When Augie Otter realizes that the other sea creatures might see him as a bit different, he worries. The very things he loves to do the best, collect and categorize shells, and spin around and around to feel a sense of calm. Well, these behaviors seem to be the reason the other children don't like him. As Augie journeys through an undersea world, his mom teaches him that we are all special, that we are all unique, and that it's okay to be you. This is a book for anyone who has ever felt judged because they are different. Follow sweet Augie through the beautifully illustrated pages to see how everyone does things differently, and discover that it is our differences that make us who we are, and that it's okay to be you. It's Okay to Be You, The Adventures of Augie Otter, written by Paul DiPietro. And did I mention? It's a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is also brought to you by Riley and Milo, written by Cassie Diadio. Processing death with a child, it's not an easy task. In fact, many people find it overwhelming. They don't know how to start the conversation with young kids. Using books, or what we call bibliotherapy, as a method of explaining loss and grief is a really effective tool for complex conversations. Riley and Milo leads young readers through the stages of grief, such as denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and acceptance. As the puppy Riley is processing the death of her best friend Milo, she explains her feelings and the impact Milo's death has on her life. This book was created to help normalize the emotions and experiences of young readers who are coping with grief and loss. Riley and Milo by Cassie Diadio is available for purchase on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Books A Million. Join us right now from Harlem in New York City and Bethesda in Maryland. We're really excited today. We're going to welcome back one of our favorite guests, Olugbemisola, Rhuday-Perkovich, and Donna Limerick. Bimmy, Donna, how are you? Welcome.
Great,
Hi.
great. Fun to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
That second voice that you heard was Bimmy. Bimmy, tell me, what brings you and Donna back to the Reading with Your Kids podcast?
Oh, well, I am excited to be back and to talk with you this time about Mae Makes A Way, the true story of Mae Reeves, hat and history maker. Mae Reeves was an incredible milliner, activist, community member in Philadelphia who had a shop in Philadelphia for over 50 years, where she provided a lot more than just hats to the community. And Donna Limerick is Mae's daughter, who was a big part of the life of the store and that life in the community. And I had the opportunity to speak with her and get stories from her and really collaborate with her in the process of writing this story.
That's wonderful. Donna, I grew up in an inner city neighborhood in Boston, and a lot of those businesses that are in those neighborhoods become so much more than just a business selling hats. They really become a part of the community.
Right, absolutely. And my mother's hat world was exactly the same way. She began her first business in downtown Philadelphia when she was 28 years old. In 1938, she got a loan for $500 and went straight down the street in a neighborhood of Philadelphia and opened her first hat shop. And she became the first African American woman to own a business in downtown Philadelphia. And the community there just loved her. They took her under their arms, and her life continued like that for 50 years in different neighborhoods of Philadelphia, moving around.
Wow, that's wonderful. I really love that you really made a point of telling us that the people in the business communities in those neighborhoods embraced her. You know, we hear so many stories of African Americans, you know, being shunned and all sorts of obstacles being put up. It sounds like the people in your mom's life try to give her a helping hand and make things better for her.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it had a lot to do with her personally. She was a friendly woman, really loved people from all walks of life. Her customers were from celebrities like Marian Anderson, and my mind is going down. Marian Anderson and other people who lived in
Lena
Philadelphia.
Horne.
Yeah, Lena Horne,
Ella
Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald. Yeah.
Yeah. And right down to domestic workers and women who were teachers or other socialites. They were all welcome to her shop, and she treated all of them just the same. So it made for goodwill in that area, especially in fashion when, as we know, it was kind of segregated in those days, and women didn't socialize, but they all gathered in Mae's shop. Every hat shop she had, the women were right there all together laughing and talking.
That's wonderful. And there's so much joy in your voice when you mention Mae's shop. I mean, just hearing that, it's like, it sounds like a place where everybody feels at home.
Yeah, they did. And Bemi has been able to show that in the book as well. When you read the story, you see wonderful pictures of people in the community. You see family pictures of me and my brothers and other family members hanging out in the hat store. So it was always just a fun place to grow up. I am very, very blessed to have a mom who was so open to the community and helped me enjoy life as well at the same time.
That's wonderful.
I love the way that in the research, it talked a lot about people just calling her mom and calling her Mama Mae, just all over the community and all over the neighborhood. She just was such a caring, giving member of the community. And you feel it as soon as you go into the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., and you see her exhibit, that huge, I mean, it's really the centerpiece of the section of the museum called Making a Way Out of No Way. And you see this huge exhibit where they've kind of recreated the shop, Mae's Millinery. And there's some video of her. And immediately from the first time I visited, you see that personality that Donna's talking about, that warmth and that sort of generosity of spirit that I think won people over everywhere.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like she was a celebrity to the celebrities.
Oh, really? Absolutely. And it's something that I didn't learn until late in life. I just thought she was my mom. I'm a journalist, and for years in broadcasting, I've via the radio interviewed lots of celebrities, and my mom would just say, "Oh, that's great. I'm glad you interviewed the president. I'm glad you interviewed Stevie Wonder, all these people." And it wasn't until the museum came calling that I realized my mom was a pioneer and a celebrity. So I just took that, being a journalist, and ran with it to try to understand every ounce of how that happened, when the museum came calling. But it wasn't until they came that I realized my mom was a celebrity.
Now, Bimi, how did you become involved in the project?
So I had done some other nonfiction work, and my editor, Phoebe Ye at Crown Random House, had read one of my picture book biographies and had already been in talks with the museum about creating a biography of Mae Reeves. And so they kind of brought me in and brought me on that was my first visit to the Smithsonian, because I'd been trying to get tickets forever and I was never able to get tickets. So I got to come in this time, like early in the morning, and just spend time just learning about Mae Reeves, because I hadn't known about her and her life and what she did. And immediately I thought of my mom, I thought of my grandmother, and just like how important hats were to women at a particular time in this country, and like what they meant. And like Mae Reeves made those hats called showstoppers, that were especially for the church ladies and women to wear on Sundays. And it just brought back a lot of memories, and just it made me think a lot about how, when women were going through a tough time, how her shop was not just a warm and welcoming place, but it was kind of like a revolutionary place, because as Donna said, like, no matter who you were, you came in, you sat down next to whoever was there, you talked, everyone was welcome the same way, you interacted in a way that in a lot of other places in the country and even in the same city, it wasn't necessarily like that. Like, she really created a special space.
Yeah.
And you know what I love about what you said? When I'm ever at the museum and a mom comes through with her children, she's able to go back in history, because the mother right away would say, oh, my grandmom used to wear hats like that. My mom used to wear hats like that. And then the little children start asking questions because they've never seen hats before this kind of way. And then they'll say, well, where's your hat? You know, we don't have any hats, Mom. We want some hats. So it really does inspire generations of children when they read this book or go to the exhibit. Hats were a wonderful thing in women's lives for many, many years.
Yeah. They were kind of like crowns in a way.
Yeah.
They were, and it sounds definitely, in your mom's case, she wasn't, churning hats out like they're churning out in a factory. It sounds like every hat was individually made with a lot of love and care.
Right, one of a kind. Every hat was one of a kind for almost 50 years. She didn't retire until she was in her 90s. That's when she left the hat shop. And before she left, she went to assisted living, and she said to my brother and I, Donna, meaning I'm the only daughter, she pointed to me, don't touch anything in my shop. I'm coming back to make more hats. And she made that announcement at 94, and she lived to be 104, still thinking about her hats.
Oh, good for her. That's wonderful. You were talking about the feeling and the warmth. One of the things I remembered about the shops in my neighborhood is, long before the internet, they were the places where people went to get the news about what was going on in the neighborhoods. Yeah.
Yeah. And the research, there was a lot of what I think traditionally someone might not think of Mae Reeves as an activist in the traditional sense, but because she had that space and because it was a community space where people would come and talk about what was going on in the community, what maybe they could do together to improve conditions for people, how she had voting machines brought into the shop so that it was used as a polling place, so people had access to vote. Like, that to me is like the kind of activism that's so important, and the caring for people and the nurturing of people. And that's the kind of, I guess we'd say like unsung hero that really, I think, is at the foundation of progress and good work and change that happens in the community and like from the roots of the community.
Yeah. Right. But the most fun days were Easter and Mother's Day, as you can imagine. Women would be coming and going all day. My mom, she really made the hats alone, except during those times. And she would invite my aunties and other people, some seamstress ladies in, and they would be in the back of the shop, and they'd be coming. And, Mom would say, Mrs. Jones, she wants red. She doesn't want a purple flower. She wants red on her hat. So they were creating changing the hats round the way they wanted it on Easter. And it all happened within a few minutes. And they were having a great time for days and days, right up until the shop would sometime close at 10 o'clock. People were still coming, getting their Easter and Mother's Day hats.
Wow. Wow. Is there one hat that you remember that's something that was so unique that really stands out in your memory?
Well, my mom was famous for turbans. Because she believed that you just couldn't plop a hat on a person's head because it had to fit their face. And so either she would have the material or the ladies would come with some material from an outfit they were wearing. In those days, they called it an ensemble, when you wear everything matching from head to toe. So they might come up with some beautiful silk material. She'd sit them down and actually drape the hat around their head to fit their face. And that's what she was mostly known for, that she could make beautiful turbans that really look like crowns on your head.
Yeah.
And then, of course, for people like Lena Horne and other Ella Fitzgerald, she made more fancy kinds of hats for them that everyday women probably wouldn't wear. But I wasn't born then, so I never saw them. I never saw those hats. But they were definitely called, as Bemi said, showstoppers.
Wow.
And I always think of that beautiful one in the photos that comes up with you wearing the black with the pink flowers.
Yes.
That one is just stunning.
Yeah. That is a lovely hat. I was going to wear it today, but I didn't. But anyway, it's a beautiful hat. It's a high crown hat, and it's made of velvet, really wonderful velvet. And each rose across the top is handmade, cut with the velvet and sewn with little rhinestones on it. And the first time I wore that was to a tea party at the White House, because I was working, as I said, not in Philadelphia, in Washington at the time, and I was invited to a tea party by Rosalind Carter. And I said, Mom, I'm going to a tea party. I don't know what to wear. She grabbed the hat, popped it on my head, and I'm like, well, this is from the 1950s. This was in the 70s. And she said, don't worry, just wear the hat. I wore the hat, and the hat was the talk of the tea party. And I still wear that hat today. It's my favorite hat. If I go to a tea party, that's my tea hat for sure.
It's stunning.
That's wonderful. I'm wondering, why do you think hats are not as prevalent today as they were in your mom's time?
Bemi, tell them about what happened in the 1960s and 70s.
A lot of what happened had to do with just the changing hairstyles. Women wearing like really high bouffants, big afros. That changed everything for hats. And so at that point, it started being really more of a church thing for the most part, and like maybe like a very special occasion or
wedding, maybe a wedding.
A wedding, yeah, exactly, something like that. But that's when it sort of stopped being the everyday essential. Like you really, it's hard to think about now. And I think for kids, like thinking about as readers, like thinking about like a hat. Like you put on a hat like you put on socks and shoes, and like it was an everyday thing.
And there's some wonderful pictures of that transition in the book that the illustrator Andrea
Pippins.
Yeah.
She did such a beautiful job, I think, with the book, and just showing that transition, and just sort of as times changed and people's relationships with hats changed.
And for me, what's really special about the book, the more I look at it, are seeing illustrated pictures of myself in a book. I never imagined, I'm a documentary producer. I never imagined I would be in a book and, I would be illustrated as a little child. I just can't get over it. And even my grandchildren look at it. Grandmom, is that you? I keep saying, yeah, that's really me. That's how I look at the little girl. And then they recognize other relatives. Is that Uncle Sonny? Who was that? And then I point pictures out, because we really do go back through the generations and show me growing up and, Mae maturing, and it's just wonderful. It's a wonderful family story.
Yeah, it sounds like it. you told us you were surprised, and it wasn't until the museum contacted you, Donna, that you realized that your mom was a celebrity. What about the grandkids now? What's their reaction when they see their great-grandmother's story being told in a picture book and, being celebrated in the museum?
They are so excited. Mae has a big family. I have the notes here. I had to look at it. She had 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, and 10 great-great-grandchildren. So all of these kids now are so excited about this book. They've received copies. The older ones take it to school. They brag about it. The little ones just want to keep looking at the pictures over and over and over again. So it's been a wonderful, exciting thing going on in our family.
That's wonderful. I'm sure, Bimmy, that this is going to inspire kids to go out and create their own businesses, create their own shop, whether it's a hat shop or a computer shop or whatever it is, but just of recreate that warm family feeling that was in Mae's shop.
I hope so. And I hope it really inspires kids to just think about being makers and creators, because she was creating works of art. Mm-hmm. And as Donna said, it was all done by hand and, not sort of mass produced, and just, it made me think a lot about my own childhood and how I used to like to make costumes and play dress up and kind of swipe a few of my mom's and my grandmother's, probably too special for me to play with, hats and gloves, and just sort of play around and think and imagine and create. And we've talked about before just how important that is for just development, for literacy, for growth and for change. So I hope that it really does inspire kids to think about making and to think about being entrepreneurs and to sort of think about making their own way in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's wonderful how the book starts with Mae as a little girl, and you see her all dressed up every day. She grew up in the South, Vidalia, Georgia, and that's not what you call a city dress-up place, but Mae loved to dress up every day. And even when she went to school, she made her own costumes. And because she made her own costumes, she was usually the star of the show. And then she helped write it. She helped direct it. So even when she was 7, 8, 9, 10, right up through high school, she was involved in creating and making things that she thought were beautiful, until she became a hat designer.
Wow. I'm curious, Bimmy, writing this book and hearing these stories and learning about Mae, did it inspire you to go out and get your hat?
It's funny, I thought a lot about when I was a kid. I used to wear hats a lot when I was a kid. And I used to, especially for some reason, borrow my grandfather's. He had those kind of cabbie hats. And so I used to really love wearing those when I was a kid. So it did make me think about the hats that I used to wear then. And I like to knit hats a lot. I love to knit hats. So I actually started knitting a few hats while I was working on the book, a few new hats while I was working on the book. And I have saved some of my grandmother's gloves, the really long ones. Yeah. And so I took some of those out and really brought back some nice memories.
That's wonderful.
Right. I was inspired by hats when I was a little girl. I still have some hats that my granddaughters now wear. In fact, we just did a little presentation for an organization I belong to called the Hillwood Museum, and I took some hats there, and they wore hats as well. They wore hats that I wore as a teenager. Aww. And everybody just loved it because they just looked so adorable wearing my hats that my mother made. And we have tea parties, and I have hats around, and they always want to wear one of the hats that I have around. So they're really getting involved with hats as well. But the thing I wanted to say is that since that hat I wore to the White House, I started wearing hats ever since. That's been since the 1980s or 70s. And now it sometimes make me feel really sad when I wear a hat, and I'm probably the only one in the room wearing a hat, and so many women will come up to me and say, "Oh, I love your hat. I have so many hats. I just don't wear them anymore." Mm-hmm. And I just say, "Well, just put it on, they're still waiting for you." Or they tell me, "I have my grandmother's hats, my mother's hats." And I just hope that when I wear hats, it's an inspiration to these women to go pull out their hats again.
Yeah. Well, I know in my own life, suddenly as I lose the hair on top of my head, my desire to wear hats is growing stronger and stronger every day.
Hats are fun. And it just sets you apart from other people walking down the street.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that people open doors for me because I'm wearing a hat. If I'm going in a building, a lady or another person, I was, after I left you, Bemi, we did a signing the other day. I sat on a park bench outside of the museum, and a lady came and she wanted to know if it was all right to sit next to me because I was so dressed up wearing a hat. I said, "Oh, sure." She said, "Well, you were so dressed up, I didn't know if I could sit next to you." And this is on a park bench.
Yeah, I think about that with my grandmother. Like, I know for her, she was from Jamaica, and I know for her, hats were such a big part of, like, she was a very tall woman, 5'11", and when she put on a hat, it was almost like this transformation happened, and it was for her like a very special thing. Like, I'm putting on this hat and I'm going to go out and people are going to see me and people are going to treat me with respect because I'm dressed like this and because I have this hat on.
Yeah. Well, our people do treat us differently depending on how we're dressed. I think that's a great lesson for, it might not be fair, might not be right, but it's a good lesson for kids to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think we could talk about hats and about Mae all night long, but I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about Mae Reeves and also more about you, Bemi.
Well, they can definitely go to the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., or just look online. There's some of the collection that you can see online, and some articles that you can read and about Mae and about her 3 shops in Philadelphia, and how her sort of life and her travels from Vidalia, Georgia to Philadelphia were a big part of the story of the Great Migration. So there's some wonderful history lessons just in her life. And for me, you can find me on my website, Olugbemisolabooks.com, but you can put in the title of any of my books, Mae Makes A Way, and you'll find me that way too.
And Donna, you mentioned a couple of times that you were a documentary filmmaker. Is there a place where we can see some of your work?
Well, no, I'm actually a documentary producer. I was the head of National Public Radio's documentary department for about 18 years. And now I left and I started my own production company, and I produce and syndicate programs. But one point I want to make is Mae's name is Mae Reeves, Reeves. So when you Google, you have to Google Mae Reeves, have a glass of chocolate and some milk and cookies, and parents can sit all day long because there's so much on the website about her from A to Z. And it's a good family time to just look at the pictures and laugh and talk and see the beautiful hats if you Google Mae Reeves, Mae Reeves.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a wonderful time speaking about somebody that sounds to me like an absolutely wonderful person and somebody that I wish I had a chance to have met. Mae Reeves. Our guests today have been Mae's daughter, Donna Limerick, and the author of this brand new picture book, Mae Makes a Way, Olugbemisola, Rhuday-Perkovich. Thank you so much, my friends, for being with us.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me join as well. I've loved every minute. Thank you a lot.
Please join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Danica Davidson. She'll be here to talk to us about I Will Protect You, a true story of twins who survived Auschwitz. Really important powerful conversation that you don't want to miss. That's the next episode of the podcast. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guests, Donna Limerick and Olugbemisola Rhuday-Perkovich. Please be sure to check out Mae Makes A Way. Also want to thank our sponsors, Riley and Milo by Cassie Diadio. And Augie the Otter, The Adventures of Augie the Otter, It's Okay to Be You by Paul DePietro. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Belcastro, Ashley Contouris, Mirabella Q, Rain Pan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.